Welcome to the This channel. Today we explain Numbers chapter 24 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're looking at one of the most dramatic, unexpected reversals in the entire biblical narrative, and we're going to break down exactly what happens on the ground.
So, to set the scene, what actually happens when a hired cursor is forced to speak blessings? Okay, let's dive right into it. King Balak of Moab has literally hired the prophet Balaam to curse the Israelites. He's paying top dollar for this. But right here in the first two verses of chapter 24, something major shifts. Balaam is looking out over the encamped Israelites who are organized perfectly, tribe by tribe. And instead of going off to look for omens like he usually did in the past, the Spirit of God comes upon him directly. He's completely overcome by divine power. This forces him to speak ultimate, undeniable truths instead of the curses that King Balak so desperately paid for. It's a total game changer.
Here is our roadmap for this walkthrough. First, we'll look at the context and Balaam's vision. Second, the third oracle. Third, we'll see Balak's anger boil over. Fourth, the prophecy of a star from Jacob. Fifth, the final prophecies. And lastly, we'll wrap up with some practical life lessons you can actually use.
Let's start with part 1, context in Balaam's vision.
Let's look at verses 3 and 4, where Balaam sets the stage. He declares that his eyes are finally, truly opened. He introduces himself as someone whose eyes sees clearly, and the text tells us he falls prostrate. He is physically overwhelmed, lying face down on the ground, receiving this completely unfiltered vision. You know, he's no longer just some passive observer or a guy trying to read omens in nature. He has become a direct vessel for the divine.
Now, what's incredibly fascinating here in verse 4 is the specific Hebrew word used for God, Shaddai. This translates to the Almighty. Using Shaddai here really emphasizes the sheer unstoppable absolute authority of the God who is now speaking directly through Balaam. Think about it. When Shaddai speaks, human kings like Balak, they simply do not matter. The vision Balaam is receiving right now is coming from the highest possible authority in the universe. There's no overturning this.
That brings us to part 2, the third oracle, covering verses 5 through 9.
As Balaam physically looks down at the literal tents of the Israelites in verse 5, the Spirit of God translates that everyday view into some incredibly rich poetic imagery in verse 6. He describes their camp like valleys spreading out, like lush gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by the Lord, and majestic cedars beside the waters. This is a picture of absolute, thriving vitality. Remember, they are out in a harsh, dry, arid wilderness, but God's people are being depicted as well-watered, deeply rooted, and flourishing beyond belief.
Then, in verse 7, the prophecy shifts gears from their present beauty to their future power. Balaam predicts that water will flow from their buckets, which is an ancient metaphor meaning they'll have endless provision and fertility, and he says their future king will be greater than Agag. Now you might be wondering, who is Agag? Well, Agag was actually a dynastic title for the kings of the Amalekites, kind of like how Pharaoh was used in Egypt. This simply means that Israel's future leadership is going to completely overshadow the fiercest, most intimidating enemies known to them at that time. Their kingdom is going to be exalted way above all the local superpowers. Verses 8 and 9 brilliantly illustrate this God-given strength using these fierce animal metaphors to show just how unconquerable Israel really is. Balaam says God brought them out of Egypt, and they have the relentless power of a wild ox. They're going to devour hostile nations, literally break their bones, and pierce them with arrows. Then he compares them to a lion and a lioness, crouching down. Just picture that, majestic, at rest, but so incredibly dangerous that absolutely nobody in their right mind would dare to wake them up. And the oracle ends with the ultimate massive reversal of Balak's entire plan. Balaam declares, "May those who bless you be blessed, and those who curse you be cursed." So, how does the king react? Part 3, Balak's anger. Let's check out verses 10 and 11. The contrast between these two men here is just striking. In verse 10, King Balak officially loses it. He violently claps his hands together in a total fit of rage because he's entirely lost control of the situation. He yells at Balaam, angrily pointing out, "I hired you to curse my enemies, but instead you blessed them 3 times. Balak demands that he flee back home immediately, and he mocks him, basically saying, "Hey, the Lord you're so bound to? Yeah, he just kept you from the massive, handsome reward I was going to give you." But look at Balaam's response in verses 12 and 13. He maintains absolute, rock-solid integrity. He reminds the furious king of exactly what he told him from the very start. Even if Balak gave him a literal palace filled to the brim with silver and gold, he cannot go beyond the command of the Lord to do anything good or bad on his own.
Now, before he packs up and leaves, Balaam isn't quite finished.
In verse 14, he delivers a final, entirely unprompted warning. He tells the king, "Look, I am going back to my people, but come, let me warn you of what this people will do to your people in days to come." It's an incredible moment. He basically forces Balak to stand there and listen to the future doom of his very own kingdom.
Which leads us straight into part 4, a star from Jacob. This is the fourth oracle. Balaam prefaces this fourth oracle by again reminding everyone that he is hearing the words of God and has knowledge from the Most High. Then, in verse 17, his vision stretches way out into the distant future. He says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near." And what does he see? A star and a scepter rising out of Israel. Now, these are clear, simple, yet profound metaphors for a powerful future ruler rising up from the Israelite people. A star represents divine brilliance and heavenly guidance, while a scepter is the ultimate symbol of absolute sovereign authority.
Verses 17 to 19 don't pull any punches. They explicitly lay out the hard military reality of this rising ruler. He is going to crush the foreheads of Moab. And remember, Moab is Balak's own nation. He's standing right there hearing this. This ruler will batter the sons of Sheth. Edom and Seir, which represent their other hostile neighbors, will be entirely conquered and become his possessions. Through this future ruler, Israel will grow exceptionally strong and wipe out any remaining survivors in those hostile cities. Balak is literally paying to listen to the total geopolitical defeat of his entire region.
But Balaam's vision stretches even further across the map. Part 5, the final prophecies, covering verses 20 through 24.
In these verses, we get a rapid-fire, step-by-step breakdown of divine judgment rippling across all the surrounding peoples. In verse 20, he looks over at Amalek. They were considered first among the nations in terms of sheer power and aggression, but Balaam says their ultimate end is total ruin. Then, in verses 21 and 22, he turns to the Kenites. Now they seem totally safe. Their nest is set in a rock, meaning their defenses are practically impenetrable. But it shows us that human fortresses just don't guarantee survival. He predicts they will be destroyed and taken captive by Asher.
Now, just to clarify these ancient geographic names in verses 23 and 24 so it makes sense to us today, Balaam predicts that ships will come from Kittim. Kittim basically refers to Western maritime or naval powers like Cyprus. And these ships will subdue massive, established Eastern powers like Asher, which is Assyria, and Eber, representing the peoples beyond the river. What Balaam is saying is that no human empire, no matter how vast or powerful, lasts forever. It's this sweeping, panoramic view showing God's ultimate, unmatched sovereignty over the rise and fall of all world history.
And then, after soaring through the distant future in the catastrophic fall of massive empires, this intensely dramatic chapter ends very quietly in verse 25. It simply says, "Then Balaam got up and returned home, and Balak went his own way." That's it. The failed plot is over. Balak's wildly expensive, elaborate scheme amounted to absolutely nothing. Both the king and the prophet just pack up and return to their places. The word of the Lord stands completely unmatched and unaltered.
So, what does this all mean for us today? Part 6, Practical Life Lessons. Let's apply the text.
There are 4 simple, incredibly powerful truths we can take away from this chapter. First, God's plans absolutely cannot be altered by human manipulation, no matter how much scheming goes on. Second, true integrity means speaking the truth, even when you are under intense pressure from powerful people who are furiously angry with you, just as Balaam did when he faced down Balak's wrath. Third, earthly wealth, like Balak's promise of silver and gold, is ultimately worthless when it goes up against the divine will. And finally, remember this. While the Israelites were just going about their daily business, living down in their tents, completely unaware of the spiritual warfare happening on the cliffs right above them, God was actively turning curses into blessings on their behalf. We are so often protected from attacks and curses we can't even see.
So, as we wrap up, think about Balaam's final choice in this chapter. He walked away from a literal palace of silver and gold because he flat out refused to speak against the truth. He proved that his integrity mattered more than profit. Will we choose to align our words and our actions with the truth, even when it costs us our earthly rewards? Will you let the truth guide your steps, even when a compromise looks incredibly profitable?
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.